Good morning. Welcome to the decarbonising energy webinar for this morning from Kratos. This morning we are talking about all things microgeneration, which it really means, in a lot of respects, retrofitting our homes. So, my name's Vicky Said. I'm Associate Director with Kratos, focusing on sustainability and planning, and I'm doing a series of webinars around decarbonising our energy. So when it comes to achieving net zero, we've all got part to play. And here at Kratos, we believe local government holds the key to achieving net zero by 2050. Kratos was built on local government, founded by a councillor, and many of our team have served and still serve, including myself, as elected members and senior leaders in councils or as officers. So we can use this experience in our work on public affairs. This 3-webinar series starts at the front door, and this episode, Reducing Demand Home by Home, is going to focus on the councils helping our residents to reduce their energy use, and on some of the partners that help them to do that. It's incredibly timely because yesterday the government announced over £500 million to improve our housing stock, and I'm delighted that 2 of our guest councils and our housing association were all recipients of those funds yesterday, and I'm sure they're going to tell us a bit more about how they're going to spend them. So Bristol, Cornwall and Leeds have all led the way in pilot projects and innovative approaches, and are going to share some of their thoughts on the hurdles they faced and some of their next steps on getting to carbon neutrality. And we've also got panellists from the provider side, Clarion Housing, BioRegional and Shift Environmental. So we're going to get to know our panel first of all and discuss the landscape of housing. Please join in by asking any questions and we'll weave them into the discussion as we go. And at the end of the session, we'll be happy to share details from the panellists about their work. I know they were all really keen to produce some slides for us, but the nature of it means it works much better if we're having a conversation. So if anybody would like that, we can provide those to you afterwards. So I'm going to take people in alphabetical order. I'm going to start with Councillor Kai Dudd from Bristol City Council. So Kai, over to you. Tell us a bit about your role and what Bristol are up to.
Thanks for that introduction, Vicky. I'm the cabinet lead in Bristol for transport and energy, actually, so they fit quite well together. But I'm really proud to lead on the energy work that we're doing in Bristol at the moment. We've invested tens of millions of pounds into low carbon technology into the city, including the council's own estate, but also we own infrastructure like solar panels and a massive wind turbine out in Avonmouth, if you know Bristol, right near the port, that actually generates income that then supports the work of our energy service within the council. So we've got about 50-something officers working on energy projects and energy policy within the council, and that's, I think it's, somebody once told me it's the biggest energy service in the country in terms of local government. And that's partly because we've got that sort of sustainable revenue stream to do that work. So we've focused on a few areas in recent years. One of the main areas that we're focusing on at the moment is district heating systems. We've actually developed a report in Bristol that's really pinpointed where our problems are with CO2 emissions, and the largest single contributor to that, 40% of Bristol CO2 emissions, is servicing the need and demand for heat. So we've been focusing on what we can do to decarbonise that demand and obviously reduce that demand as well through projects like insulation and both for domestic and commercial properties. But we're now focusing on actually how, you know, there is always going to be that demand for heat. How do we decarbonise that? So we're developing a network of district heating systems in the city. We've recently won £7 million from the government to extend the heating system that we've already developed in Bristol. So we've got a small one called the Redcliffe District Heating System, which basically connects a council estate, and we've been extending that over recent years to connect up to office blocks within the city centre, and then any new development that is built out in the city centre. We've got the planning policy to support that. So we've got the heat hierarchy in our planning policy, And we've got two key areas really which enable us to be successful in getting developers to connect to that. That's the climate change impact, which district heating rates very well on, and then also sustainable energy, because there is a temptation for developers to work in traditional ways to install electric storage heaters and things like that that one aren't very good in terms of their cost effectiveness, but also they're very poor in their energy efficiency in terms of the amount of energy you need to input into those systems to deliver the required heat. Whereas district heating systems are very good on that in terms of the heat obtained from a unit of energy that you put into it. One thing we have noticed though is what we're doing is pretty much small fry, actually, if we're honest about it. And we've actually worked out that to decarbonise the energy system of Bristol, we would need around about £5 billion to decarbonise the energy system of Bristol. So we all thought we're doing very well in working with grants in the tens of millions, but if we're really going to make an impact and get to that 2030 target of decarbonisation that we've set ourselves, then we need investment in the billions of pounds. Obviously, the council doesn't have that money. The government isn't stepping up to the plate in terms of money to that level. So we've developed a programme in Bristol called the City Leap Energy Programme, because we really need to step up from the tens of millions to the billions of pounds of investment. So we put out a soft market testing exercise just to see if there was any interest out there in the private market for companies and organisations to get involved with Bristol to help us deliver our ambition. We received enormous amount of interest, 181 expressions of interest, local, national, and around the world. What we decided to do on the back of that, after analysing all that interest, is to set up a joint venture company to take forward that interest, where the council would be a 50% owner, and then a strategic partner would then come in to help us deliver that billions of pounds worth of investment that's required to decarbonise the city. So we're in a live procurement exercise at the moment to deliver that joint venture partner. It is something that will probably be a 20-year relationship, so it's not your typical council procurement, and also the size of it as well. It's a huge procurement exercise. We've got 3 companies interested. So we've got E.ON and Marubeni. So E.ON, obviously, electricity company that people would have heard of, and Marubeni is a big Japanese conglomerate. We've got Engie, the French electricity company that's part owned by the French state, and they're working with a Japanese conglomerate called Sumitomo. And then we've got a partnership between Ameresco, which is an American sustainable and green energy company, working alongside Vattenfall, which is a Swedish state energy company. So real big, serious international industry interest, from both the energy industry and also big finance houses from Japan that would have the level of investment. And also they're partners that you could see a local government working with. Some of them are state owned, some of them are backed by the Japanese government as well. So although there might be some nervousness about working with these people, we think it's the only way that we can take forward our ambition to deliver carbon neutrality. So that's my introduction.
Fantastic.
Sorry if I went on too long, Vicky.
No, it's perfect. And interestingly, the government's announced 500 million today, so even Bristol, you need 10 times what the government's announced for the whole country, which is, puts it into context, doesn't it? And also, I'd just like to say with Polly coming up next, that 181 expressions of interest. So if every other council here decides that they want to go down this road, there's an awful lot of people that have already put a lot of work into this that might be interested. So I'm sure it'll be really closely watched to see how it goes, so that other innovators can sort of do this perhaps going forward. Polly Cook is from Leeds City Council, obviously looking on the officer side. So Polly, do you want to just give us a bit of a introduction to who you are and what you do in Leeds, and how you've got ahead of the game?
Hi Vicky. So I'm Polly Cook. I'm the Chief Officer for Sustainable Energy and Air Quality at Leeds City Council, and basically leading our kind of officer response to the climate emergency. I think it's worth just setting a bit of context, and in some ways you might think, what's that got to do with housing? But actually, when we declared a climate emergency, one of the key things that the politicians asked us to do was to reach out beyond our normal audience and to make sure that we were bringing the whole city with us. And I think that becomes really, really important when you start to consider housing and it's decisions that every individual has to make. You need the whole city and the whole country to understand the climate emergency and to understand the need for change. So that public engagement is kind of equal in importance. So the sort of issues that Kai's mentioned around funding, we're seeing jobs and skill gaps and capacity in the market as challenges as well. But actually, that public engagement and bringing people with us on that journey is actually really fundamental as well. In Leeds, we're really lucky. We've got the Leeds Climate Commission, so they help us. They're set up by the university and co-chaired by us, but they bring the public and private sector together and the third sector. And they carry out a lot of that kind of understanding the kind of roadmap and the challenges and issues. They've done a climate action readiness assessment on housing specifically, looking at actually where are the barriers and the blockers, and then pull together a working group across all the different sectors to see actually what is our action plan and how do we move from that pilot project delivery stage. And Leeds is doing really well. We're attracting a lot of the funding from government and from ERDF funding previously. But I think, as Kai rightly said, it's a drop in the ocean for what we have to deliver. And it's how we move from that pilot stage, which is fantastic because we've got really good demonstration. We know it works, to that rapid rollout and delivery. And one of the things, so this year we've just secured 25 million for our public sector estate. And again, that's really critical in that public engagement path, because actually when we start to decarbonise things like leisure centres and put air source heat pumps in, it's actually giving the public visibility of that technology and starting to normalise some of the things that we're going to be asking residents to accept into their own homes. And then similar to Bristol, we have a large district heating network. We've already connected 2,000 of our own residents' flats to that, and moving that along and providing opportunities for private sector developers to connect. And alongside that, we have one of the largest tower block estates in the country. We are doing massive work around decarbonising those, which is really challenging. A lot of them need kind of external works, external wall insulation, but also the again, connecting to the localised district heating network, so district heating clusters, ground source heat pumps. And there's been a lot of kind of work done to understand that technology and what's happening in the marketplace. So shall I stop there, Vicky, so we don't?
Yeah. We're gonna cover quite a lot of that. That's fantastic, Polly. Thank you. So we're going to move on to Edwina. So we're going from sort of tower blocks to rural and coastal countryside, the opposite end, on the wonderful peninsula of Cornwall. So Edwina Hanniford is a cabinet member down there. So tell us a little bit about your role and what Cornwall are up to, just as an introduction, Edwina.
Thank you. Mitten Dar, good morning. Portfolio holder for climate change and neighbourhoods, significant neighbourhoods, because I agree with Polly, it's about bringing our communities with us. We can't do this on our own, but we have this climate change is embedded across the organisation. It's the whole organisation's responsibility, not just the climate change team. I think that's an important point to make. So some of you may know that Cornwall Council declared an emergency back in 2019. We committed to an ambitious programme to strive towards making Cornwall carbon neutral by 2030. I'm actually quite confident that as a council, and we're one of the largest unitaries in the country, that we will reach that goal. But then Cornwall Council only produces about 1.5% of the carbon of Cornwall. So there's 98.5%, the rest of Cornwall. We can't do this on our own. I agree. We do need help from government. So we are one of the UK's least developed regions. Our rurality is one of our biggest challenges, but in developing our response is actually one of our greatest strengths. So the Council's holistic carbon neutral Cornwall programme will help fight climate change, but it's equally social justice and tackling inequalities is equally as important, and bring benefits to how well our communities are able to thrive in the future. So our approach is based around what we can control ourselves. So that might be policy or investment, and how we can influence the work of others to deliver on the commitment. We fully appreciate how vital it is for people to understand what will be different. For example, there will be no fossil fuel cars or gas boilers, and that's something really big to get your head around. So things will be different in how we live, work, travel if we're to bring them with us on this challenging journey. So engagement and the Team Cornwall approach and partnership are our watchwords. We've also been really clear that Cornwall Council can't deliver with this ambitious task alone, and supporting Cornwall's communities to change how they behave and articulating what we need from government and securing their support is really vital. We have been working with UK 100, the Climate Resilience Forum, and the Climate Change Countryside Forum as well, to inform COP26. So in adopting the action plan, Cabinet agreed 3 priority areas of work that we hope will have a transformational approach. One is the whole house retrofit pilot, the climate emergency development plan document, and an 8,000 hectare forest for Cornwall, a bit of mitigation going on, a bit of offsetting going on there. So in developing these actions, we've become one of 5 areas to secure government funding to deliver the whole house retrofit pilot, £4.2 million, to improve energy efficiency in our 10,500 council homes. The council and SSE Energy Solutions have match funded, and we think it will reduce the home's emissions by over 75% and inform that ask of government for further funding and skills required to deliver mass retrofit in Cornwall's housing stock. We estimate £100 million a year per year is needed for us to just to fit the 10,500 of our council homes. So Cornwall's Climate Emergency DPD is setting the policy through which our 6 focus areas will be delivered by allocating land for renewable and carbon sequestration, along with the second ask of government to improve future home standards, still waiting, and prevent retrofitting problems in the future. So thanks to an innovative partnership with Centrica, the council funded and installed the first wind turbine in Cornwall since 2016, and it's smart grid connected to overcome Cornwall's grid constraint, which is the third ask of government and vital if we are to unlock Cornwall's renewable energy potential. We see Cornwall as the powerhouse for renewables of the UK. We also have developed a decision-making wheel in response to Cabinet's concerns that no Cornish resident or business should be worse off as a result of our response to climate emergency. So this is based on the Kate Raworth donut economics model, and the tool is used in all Cabinet decisions and ensures that social justice and environmental principles, people and planet, are at the heart of our decision-making. We are further embedding the tool into our wider decision-making processes, including procurement, and this year for the first time into our budget setting process. So delivering early activity to show our commitment to acting on climate change, what was a key priority for the Cabinet. Along with the projects I've already mentioned, we've invested in new lower emission buses, fire appliances and waste collection vehicles, and we've ordered our first fleet of electric vehicles for our fleet transition, showcasing that EV can be a practical alternative to fossil fuels. And we've secured funding from government to install an additional 150 EV charging points on top of the 160 we've already fitted across Cornwall. We've also invested in UK's first deep geothermal heat and power project. The council agreed to match fund a second geothermal project at the Eden project, doubling Cornwall's potential to create a new energy sector in the UK. And we've also secured £23.5 million from government to pilot a reduced bus fare scheme to encourage people to travel by bus. That's had to be delayed because of the pandemic. We made the commitment that all our electrical energy would come from renewable sources. And in our £600 million housing development plan, we're acting as developers, and we're not using gas in any of our developments across Cornwall. And we are reviewing all our office space needs in what we're calling a target operating model. Don't know why it's called that, but basically it started before the pandemic, but it's certainly been accelerated in the pandemic. And I had to check this stat again because officers tell me that we're saving 80,000 commuting miles per day for officers, the 4,500 staff working from home. That's staggering.
It
So
is staggering.
household emissions and transport account for nearly half of Cornwall's emissions, and we're exploring green fuel as well as green energy. So we're partnered with Bennaman, an innovative Cornish company, to develop biogas fuel from captured methane on 6 of the council-owned farms. And this is being used initially to convert highway repair vehicles and maintenance, but it is scalable. And lastly, we're investing directly in schemes ourselves to respond to the climate emergency. And we've launched a new public donation, Back the Future Cornwall Climate Action Fund, to enable residents, businesses, and the millions of visitors that come to Cornwall to support low emissions and carbon capture projects in Cornwall. That was a quick gallop through what we're doing.
Wow.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm coming to Cornwall myself in the summer, so I shall be bringing my pennies to offset. And you're going to have to take me around and see some of these projects because it sounds amazing. Thank you so much to our councils. We have to remember that our councils need to work with partners, and a lot of those partners have been sort of name checked already. But some of the big partners that can help us with retrofitting the homes particularly. So the first of those, Lewis Knight is from BioRegional, and anyone that did GCSE geography, and Lewis is going to hate me for this, is going to remember BedZ, which I had to look up what it meant. But BioRegional has moved well on from that first eco village, and Lewis is going to tell us a bit about how BioRegional are working now in terms of retrofit and stock for councils and private sector. Lewis.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Yes, so for those of you that don't know who BioRegional are, so we're a charity and a social enterprise. We're sort of well over 25 years old now. We work with a whole range of different partners, ranging from those more corporate entities, corporate businesses, to create science-based target action plans, all the way through to developers and local authorities, which is the sort of area that I work in. Really, our raison d'etre is around creating a vision of a happy and healthy lifestyles for everyone. So really, how do we do that? Our sort of guiding light is our One Planet Living framework, which is loosely based on ecological footprinting, which is based on the fact that we are, as a global society, consuming too many resources than we have. Current thought is that if we all live the way that we do in the UK and most of Western Europe, we'd need 3 planets to support us. Clearly, that's not sustainable. So we have built the One Planet Living framework, which is open source, and we use that as a way to engage with our partners. And it's based on 10 simple, easy to understand principles, ranging from health and happiness, through to land and nature, through to waste and transport, and ultimately carbon as well. So from my side, I've been with BioRegional for over 8 years now, and I principally work across Oxfordshire, and also across the Oxford-Cambridge arc. I've been involved in the first of the UK's eco-town sites that some of you may have known, which is called Elmsbrook in Bicester, a little town just outside Oxford. It was the UK's first eco-town and a true zero carbon development. And so we worked alongside the lead developer there, but also the local authority. So that was Cherwell District Council, to really bring that to life. We were the sustainability coordinators or integrators. So worked very hard with the local authority as to sort of how we can embed those zero carbon principles within the local plan itself. But moving away really from that sort of new build setting, we've been working on a number of heat network developments, and so it was interesting to hear both Kai and Polly sort of name check heat networks. We've been working on a much smaller scale, so we've been working with the lowest form of government, so parish councils, using the Rural Community Energy Fund. So looking at how we can take those typically off-grid developments. So those existing settlements that are still using oil and LPG, and how we can shift them towards a more renewable form of heating. So we've worked on one of those up in Cambridgeshire, sorry, which is actually just making ground now. Actually, that's a ground source heat pump solution. But we've also been looking at much larger opportunities. So building on the back of the zero carbon eco-town scheme in Bicester, looking at how we can use waste forms of heat from nearby energy recovery facilities, using the new build settlements as a kind of anchor load to bring that waste heat into an existing town via a exemplary low carbon scheme. A couple of other things we've been working on. So we've been working with the Greater Cambridge Authority, really looking at creating a net zero carbon evidence base for their emerging local plan, which has been incredibly interesting. And I guess the biggest thing that we've been working on over the past 2 years is around our One Planet Oxfordshire programme, which is around the co-creation of a county-wide vision. And because what we found is that, as we heard earlier, an increasing number of local authorities are declaring climate emergencies, and there's seemed to be from the outside a lack of direction as to what should be done. And so what we've been doing is we've been working with a whole load of stakeholders across Oxfordshire, including the county council and the district councils, to bring them together under our sort of One Planet Living vision. And we've been tracking progress against that. And also some of the district councils have been using that county-wide vision and tweaking it and adapting it for their own local context, that's then been used as a way to sort of direct their own climate emergency plans. So Vicky, that was a real whistle-stop tour through a lot of the work we've been doing over the past sort of decade, really, across Oxfordshire and the South East.
Thanks, Lewis. So you talked a lot about sort of road mapping and sort of, planning the journey. And that's where our next panelist, Richard Lupo, comes in. So Richard, tell us a little bit about the companies that you do. And I'm going to talk in a little while about the Code for Sustainable Homes, which of course you trained assessors on the now defunct Code for Sustainable Homes. So Richard, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you very much, Vicky. Yeah, Richard Luke, I'm Managing Director of Shift Environment, and since 2008, we've been working with housing associations. So it's your local authority retain stock compatriots in their housing association field, and we've developed a assessment tool, an environmental assessment tool that's called Shift. What we do there is we've stemmed it back really from our vision of what a sustainable community looked like. Obviously, sustainable homes made from sustainable materials, green spaces everywhere, people cycling, people skipping happily through the street, blue skies, solar panels, a beautiful place to live. This is UK housing stock in the future. And our bit in it is the metrics of it. But how do you convert all of those environmental issues into metrics, and then how do you convert that into a performance gap analysis between what does the science say our environmental performance needs to be, and where is the client working to right now? So that covers carbon, biodiversity, responsible materials, waste, water. I think I've got them all there. But what we're really good at is transforming data that our clients have into a really good environmental report. So they will know the tons of carbon, millions of cubic meters of water, how many homes are at risk of flooding, homes that are at risk of overheating, percentage materials that are sustainably sourced, that kind of thing. So we tend to work mostly with housing associations. More than happy to work with local authorities too, but we've worked with a few councils as well, and I've also worked with a few developers and a millionaire who had a £30,000 electricity bill each year in a house he only lived in for 3 weeks a year, so he was a bit worried about that. What we've done a lot of research to try and convert sort of nebulous targets already been touched on here. Now, net zero, well, that's great for UK. What's that mean for housing? What is it? An EPC rating, a SAP rating? What does that mean? So we've done a lot of work to translate that into something that landlords can work towards. And we've also gone, we're doing a lot more detail. I wanted to give a bit of scale. We work with about 40 different landlords up and down the country, Scotland, Wales, England, and about 10% of them now are doing really detailed plans. All the ones we know we have their baseline, because that's what we do. But the ones, about 10% are moving on to really detailed plans. What do they need to do to each house? What decisions can they kick down the road for a little bit? Because there's lots of confusing issues around heat pumps, hydrogen boilers, that kind of thing. What does that stock look like what will that look like in 2050, and what things do they need to do now? What things can they put off till a little bit later? What can they combine with work that they're doing already, so that every intervention they make is a step towards what this home looks like in 2050? So that's our roadmaps on the interest level. And we also do roadmaps on sort of strategic level, so and try and engage with our clients and get their appetites for, do they want to go whole hog on retrofitting? But there's another angle to it as well. You can go a whole hog on new build. So we really try and encourage a lot of EPCA new build. So I'm glad there's a lot of councils here. So maybe that's something that they could do in their planning policies tomorrow,
Absolutely.
or maybe this afternoon.
Cover a bit of that. Thanks, Richard. And talking about going the whole hog, finally, Paul Norman is from Clarion, which is our largest housing association, who I think actually does have the One Planet principle. So we're linking back there to BioRegional, and there's an ambition to be that leader by 2040, I believe, Paul. So tell us a quick bit about Clarion's up to, and then we'll move on to sort of some discussion around the things you've all talked about.
Absolutely. So morning, everyone. I'm Paul Norman. I'm the head of asset management for Clarion Housing. And yeah, as Vicky said, we're the biggest affordable housing provider in the country with 125,000 properties under management. And that operates across a geography of around 150 local authority partners. We've recently launched our Clarion 2040 vision, which takes an holistic and long-term approach to our asset management strategy. And it strikes a really great balance between customer experience and also asset performance. And that vision sort of cements our commitment to tackling climate change, both as a social landlord and as a developer. The vision's got 9 standards, and I won't go through them all. It covers things like safety and space and security and neighbourhoods. But the key one sort of for the discussion today is around efficiency and affordability, where we've got a target of achieving SAP 72 in every asset within our 2040 vision. And we very much see that as making the foundations of what carbon zero will look like for us. We see the next 3 to 5 years very much as discovery, understanding what will fit. We recognise that, our geography and our assets, a single solution won't work for us. And I think it was touched on earlier where, we kind of break that down and start looking at individual portfolio reviews of our assets to understand how best to tackle some of those slightly nuanced areas outside of the norm. We've got a holistic fabric first approach, but we combine that with bespoke pilots. So we touched on the decarbonisation funding retrofit project, where we've been successful in securing the £9 million project, which will deep retrofit 160 homes across Fenland and Tunbridge and Moorland, following PAS 2035 route. We're also looking at other things around electric vehicles for our direct labour force that delivers repairs. And other things such as that. So we're open to looking at all sorts of opportunities, because we generally believe that we will require a little something of everything to deliver our aspirations. And we take a true partnering approach. So we have 20-year contracts with our planned investment partners. So Waits, NG and United Living are there to support us through the next 20 years. And our approach to customers is a relatively simple one, is that the solutions we put into people's homes need to be affordable, but they also need to be practical. And we'll talk about my Fitbit theory a little bit later, but it's how we deliver that ongoing support to customers, which is where Clarion Futures comes in, which is the charitable arm of Clarion Housing, which has a mission to provide support and skills and opportunities to our tenants. And it's that ongoing communications and support package that we think is so integral to delivering our carbon zero aspirations, because we can't just start dropping new tech into people's homes and expecting them to use it how they always have done. It's how we continually work with people to make sure that they get the best out of their assets and their homes, and use the products that we put into those homes so they continue to have affordability.
Thanks, Paul. So I just want to open it up a little bit and say, the Code for Sustainable Homes was founded in 2016. Edwina's already mentioned the Future Home Standards. Obviously, that's not due to come in until 2025. Is this the lost decade? Have we missed a trick here in having 10 years where we've not required people to push forward? Have people slid back, and are they all waiting? Sort of, it's almost like the horses at the beginning of a race, waiting to say, well, okay, we don't need to do anything just yet. Edwina, you've got your DPD, your development plan document, which I know is currently out for consultation. Do you think that's going to be enough to push things forward, or do you think we need more?
No, it's not enough, because obviously we're limited by the National Planning Policy Framework, so we can butt up against it, but we can't go through it. And that's partly the decision the council make to act as developers and build our own homes, because we can have those higher standards. We're not in a battle with developers are trying to get, not all developers, but mainly the big boys just want to make sure that they make their profits. And as a council, we don't have to make a profit. We just need to cover our borrowing costs. So no, it's not enough. There does need to be it needs to be a bit of top-down change there, and it needs to be sooner than later, because otherwise we'll be in the same position as having to retrofit the homes we're building now, and we won't want to do that.
No, agreed. And Kai, in Bristol, you mentioned the heat hierarchy. How easy has it been to bring the developers on board to join in with the district heating project? Have you found a lot of resistance around that?
I think it's a mixed bag, really. Some of them are really, really keen because they can see, having that sustainability connected to their developments like a big selling point. Others are sort of they've got a traditional mindset in terms of how they want to build their developments, and then others, the planning policy is sort of a nudge to get them over the line to doing it. So I'd guess it's a mixed bag, really. But I think we've got a good policy. Edwina's right. I mean, our planning policy is not good enough to deliver that 2030 carbon neutrality objective, but I think that heat hierarchy policy is quite good, to be honest with you. And the people that have got a problem with it is not always the sort of cutthroat developers. Sometimes we have issues with some housing associations who just want to put electric storage heating in their developments and things like that. So it's I don't think Paul's housing association is part of that, but you'd be surprised. But obviously, we're talking about the climate emergency, energy efficiency, sustainability, but there's also other policy areas that we want to achieve from our developments. So affordable housing as well, and often there's this sort of trade-off. Well, we can do that, but the amount of affordable housing we'll provide is lower. So as politicians, we're often in a very difficult position. What do you go for? Do you take the affordable housing, or do you take the energy efficiency? So I don't think the policy framework is in place to deal with both those issues at the moment. So we're always going to have problems, I think, until that changes.
So Paul, having talked about housing association, now I declare an interest in that. I worked with Clarion on a project a few months ago where within the project there was going to be a district heat network, but not connected to something externally. Are you finding the growth in the urban areas of district heat networks problematic, or do you welcome them? And you mentioned about the ease for tenants. How are they finding that move?
I think it's where it's new build. I think that they can work really well. I think you can deliver that package of communication with people coming in at the front end. They haven't got used to necessarily historic, technologies, and it's a new home, it's a new start. I think where district heating does become more problematic is when you try and retrofit it. In a development, it's part of the holistic design of that development and fits well. I think that the experiences we've had are mixed when we've tried to retrofit that type of heating system into houses that weren't necessarily designed to tackle it. So I think we've found some business cases that stacked up at the front end as we've gone through the design process in retrofit have not necessarily worked as we've gone through it. So I think you have to take it on a case by case basis.
Lewis, you wanted to come in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to echo exactly what Paul mentioned. I mean, we've been working alongside a number of, as I mentioned, sort of parish councils, so sort of on much smaller scale, and really the driver there is around cost and also the carbon element, with a number of these homes still reliant upon sort of fairly volatile prices of oil and LPG. But really there it's around engagement, where you're basically dealing with 200 potential heat users, and each of them will have a very different view on what's an acceptable cost, what is an acceptable disruption to their property. So heat networks are, yes, they are sort of one piece of the jigsaw, but they are sort of fraught with a lot of difficulties and sort of complexities. But I think in a rural setting, they can be a useful tool.
So, Polly, you specifically talked about the retrofit of the tower blocks, and so how are the residents finding that? Because Paul's concern was new build works great, retrofit not so sure. Well, what's your experience?
We've had really good experiences, and I suppose to an extent it depends what tenants are coming from. So some of ours were coming from quite old heating systems where it was sort of storage heated overnight. You had to anticipate if you were going to be cold. Whereas now they've got something where they turn it on if they're cold and it heats the flat up and provides hot water. So actually tenant satisfaction is high. The comfort conditions are better. It's cheaper. But we did employ people to specifically work with tenants on tenant engagement, to be on hand if they had problems in terms of operation of the equipment. So I don't think you can underestimate the amount of support that you need to give in those situations. But I think if it's done properly, it can be really effective.
And we talked about the difference in cost. Obviously, if they're coming from night storage, electric heating, which is probably how some of the buildings are, then there's no significant increase in cost. But if you're coming from gas, which is significantly cheaper than electric, but Edwina, that's not really an issue for you in Cornwall, because I think only less than half the properties in Cornwall are on mains gas. So what's yours? Because district heating, I hear what Lewis is saying about some rural communities, but you're going down a bit of a different route primarily, aren't you? Tell us about how that's working.
Okay, so our whole house retrofit is a pilot, so that's what we were awarded the money for, to test some of those tenants issues that you talk about. So there's some innovation going on here as well. So we chose different typologies, and I believe they're using little robots underneath the floorboards and all sorts of really innovative and interesting things. But you're quite right, Vicky, 50% of the homes in Cornwall are off the gas grid. And if I think about my own community in Looe and Polperro, very steep-sided valleys, the opportunities for solar or even wind in a protected landscape for an AONB, and actually the houses are facing the wrong way for solar. Yeah, we do have some challenges. The challenge we've also got in Cornwall is that because we are a long way from centres of population, some of the supply chains can be a bit of an issue, but actually that's a positive, because we want to develop the supply chains. So there's an economic benefit to retrofitting, because we want to home grow our tradespeople to manage them. So there's two big developments, well, big by Cornwall standards, at Langarth and at West Carglaze. They're not exactly eco developments, but they are based on the garden villages principles. So they will be self-sufficient in their energy, but it's using the design and the master planning process to really make sure that you have net carbon zero homes for the future.
So, Richard, what's the general sort of, you're working with social landlords. How are they rising to the challenge? Are they worried about these sort of issues, or are they, approaching it with a really positive attitude?
Yeah, like I say, about 10-15%, just based on a sample of the people I work with, they're really getting into the detailed, dirty work of, what home needs what doing to it, how much is it going to cost, which ones are we going to dispose of, which ones are we going to regenerate. So that's what 10-15% of them are. Most of them now have got an idea of the scale of the cost. Of course, it's really hard to put exact pounds and pence onto it because there's so many different varying factors. One of which is the definition of zero carbon for homes,
Mm-hmm.
but they haven't gone on to the actual works of doing the detailed planning. But they're faced with a lot of other issues, fire being the main one that they're really dealing with. And then in terms of actual, kit on the homes, there's been a historic, throughout the sector, there's been quite a historic activity with the eco grants and CERT and CESP and all that kind of thing for the easy wins, the loft insulation, the cavity wall insulation, the boiler upgrades and things like that. But when you're getting onto the big ticket items like solar panels, external wall insulation, heat pump on off gas things, then it's a lot slower. It's very much pilots. Well, I'm starting to call them stepping stones now. I'm encouraging my clients to call them stepping stone projects because pilots have got a bit of a what's the word? Not a stigma, but they sound like, oh, funding, get it, do the project, run off. We got the funding. Not let's
but
do
sometimes
this
it's a
and
bit like
see
a tick in a box, doesn't it? If it's a pilot, you're not going to carry on with it.
So for the people I'm around, getting them to encourage their boards to talk about a stepping stone project. We need to know this, and this is a suitable home to do it in. Let's learn from it, and then let's make the next one cheaper and cheaper.
So, I mean, that's interesting because, I mean, looking at some of the projects that are going the whole house retrofits and ones in Cornwall in particular, some of them are incredibly expensive, and funding can be quite difficult to secure. I think, especially for those smaller councils where it's 2 or 3 tier authorities, maybe don't have the expertise, and then obviously private households or smaller housing associations. Lewis, is it really feasible for councils to implement the One Planet principles on current stock? Or is it actually, should we be considering decommissioning those inefficient buildings completely and starting afresh with net zero buildings? What's your view on that?
It's a really, really good question, and I think it's kind of the $1 million question a lot of the times is, is it more cost effective to sort of knock down and then rebuild, in terms of carbon, in terms of the embodied carbon, but also the sort of operational carbon as well. In terms of One Planet Living, One Planet Living is just a way of viewing sustainability, and it's been used all across the world, in fact, in as many different settings that you could imagine. So absolutely, it can be used as a way to sort of guide the sustainability of existing stock. In terms of the sort of demolish and new build question, I think it's a very difficult one because I just don't think you're never going to sort of remove all of your existing stock, and so our focus is very much on every new house that is built now has to be zero carbon, because if not, you're just locking in a retrofit problem that you're going to have to deal with 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And so for me, my focus is just making sure that every single new build project that we work on, we are just trying to turn that dial up as much as we can. So almost all of the large major schemes we work on now are zero gas, and our sort of angle there is, the future home standard is coming in. It's going to push you down that route anyway. So let's just do it now. There's been a little bit of sort of pushback from a number of developers that I think you'd imagine, and I think Kai picked up on it, which is developers like to do things the way that they've done things, and this is just slightly different. And it's interesting. A lot of it comes down to cooking. They say, a lot of developers say, well, people want gas gas cooking, and so we've actually done quite a bit of research into sort of projects that don't have gas as their main source of cooking. The Elmsbrook scheme that I mentioned is a all electric scheme. So there are precedents there, and I think it is just a sort of mind shift.
So perhaps what we really need is we need a celebrity chef to get behind non-gas cooking, because you see them, don't you, with the flames and the that. Actually,
we even did a trial, Vicky, with Nando's. We've been working with Nando's, and they're actually a very good company in terms of their sort of sustainability principles. And I know from colleagues that they were sort of trialing sort of different ways to cook their food that wasn't resulting in gas. I don't actually know the outcome of that, but I know that sort of food and beverage companies are sort of looking at how they are going to adapt in this sort of transition where there sort of won't be gas. Maybe, yeah. Sorry.
Sort of the end of the flame grilled burger, though.
No idea.
Talking of I think we need to get Jamie Oliver on this, don't we? How do you do a flame grilled burger without a flame? That's the big thing. So, talking of expertise, Polly, really, it's you need really good officers. You need really good teams who really know what they're talking about. And we've got over 300 councils. We've got some big councils on here. You're all big unitary authorities. You've got everything under your control. How do you do that when you're perhaps a small district or a multi-tiered area that perhaps you don't have that expertise? What advice would you give to councils looking to move things forward without that?
I think with the way sort of local government's gone now, there's a lot more support at a regional level with things like the combined authority or the LEPs or the energy hubs, and I think it's kind of reaching out for that. I think it's peer-to-peer learning. So, if you have got a larger authority in your area, not being afraid to ask for help, to have a look at projects. There's lots of things that you can take from other councils in terms of procurement documents or approaches or, understanding kind of the challenges. So I think, reaching out to others to learn from experience and sort of partnering with people. I think it's just really important to understand kind of the risks associated with projects so that when you enter into a partnership, that it's a well thought through partnership, and that you've got the right expertise. So it may be that, if you haven't got that in-house, you do need to rely on consultancy or something to make sure you get off on the right foot. But there are lots of good kind of corporate partners out there who are working with local authorities across the country.
And Kai, obviously you've talked about the funding you've already had from government and now looking at this private sector partner. Funding really is the elephant in the room, isn't it? I'm not sure that a local sort of district council has got the capacity to go and do their own sort of village leap. Well, what is that a model that you think is replicable across all levels of local government?
I think you can replicate it substantially, but I think you're right. At a smaller scale, it might be more cost effective or efficient for, say, a local district to get involved with Bristol or another council that's doing a similar project, rather than try and start from scratch and do their own procurement, large scale international procurement process. So I would definitely recommend you speak to Leeds or Bristol or other authorities that have got a really good record on energy development.
And is there the potential then for some of those bigger councils to become providers for some of those smaller councils? I'm wondering whether those networks will develop over time so that you create an income stream for you in being able to provide that support for other councils that don't have it.
Yeah, we definitely see that as a potential revenue stream for us. We're already project managing some energy efficiency projects for our neighbouring councils. So we're doing stuff in North Somerset. We're part of the regional hub with Plymouth and other councils, and there is work that we already do for those councils. So I don't think there's any sort of shame in that, or we have to do everything ourselves. sometimes if there is expertise held locally, it's better to use that than try to do it yourself, I think.
And finally, I mean, this year is COP26, obviously in Glasgow, and I suppose in some ways that makes it easier for us to keep that momentum going around the race to net zero. But how do you keep that momentum up in the longer term? You know, for example, if we're asking people to make significant behaviour change, how do we keep them motivated? Paul, you had an interesting analogy on this. How do you really get people to get behind this?
It is, yeah. So this is the Fitbit theory. So this is around, you know, you get your Fitbit, and in the first 3 months you'll often do your 10,000 steps a day, and every hour you do your 250. But over time, even though you're where you're watching it bleeps at you, eventually you stop doing it and you just revert back to old behaviours. And I think that's where it comes in, is that ongoing support and communications package, is that, you know, you keep needing to nudge people to do the right thing, because it's very easy to slip back into our ways, and suddenly the energy bill starts to creep up in a way that you don't necessarily realise, and then suddenly it just tips into that position where you didn't necessarily know about it. So it's how you do it without being intrusive in people's lives. So it's a real balancing act to make sure you get it right. But it's one I think myself and Clarion are really passionate about, because we recognise that is, you know, what we put in people's homes is really important, but how they use it is more so important, and it's not something you can just drop on them and expect them just to pick it up and run with it.
And of course, councils have got a role to play in signposting people, haven't they, towards, you know, the schemes that are available for them, their own sort of. I know in Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole, where I am, we have LEAP, but it's not your LEAP, Kai. It's the, you know, it's that sort of energy partnership to signpost and get people on board. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that the, you know, LGC said that councils were 5 times more likely to be trusted by people in their communities than the government. So as councils, there's a responsibility to help people through the information and drive that forward. So it's about that hand holding, giving advice, signposting people, leading by example, you know, making sure that our councils are doing things like, you know, using the slurry from our fields to power our refuse trucks and things, Edwina, rather than, you know, gas. I know in BCP we're looking at chip fat, because obviously being a seaside town, we've probably got a lot of fish and chips going on. So I think, you know, it is about that leading by example, and certainly everyone here is doing that. It's absolutely an inspirational, you know, lot of work that's going on. We're coming to the end, so I just want to thank you so much for your insight. I think it's been absolutely incredible to hear what's going on, and in fact, it's only been 2 years since most people declared a climate emergency, and we've had a pandemic. So, you know, we're very happy to share your climate plans and some of your innovations with people. So if you want to, you know, send them to me, and we can make sure that happens. And as creators, we've always worked closely with local government, so we're now seeing a lot more interest in councils looking to help in supporting their decisions to declare a climate emergency and turn them into real projects. So this series is part of that. And next time we're going to look at the planning process. So you've got some of these planning policies, but how the local plan process can make sure that locally produced energy is being considered, and how councils and communities can invest in direct and renewable energy, which I you know, interestingly, the same councils that are here today, Edwina's talked about, you know, the wind turbine, the geothermal. Kai's talked about it in Bristol. You know, we know there are councils doing some great things. So it'd be really good to sort of get your insight on whether community-owned and council-owned renewables needs to play a much bigger part going forward. So thank you all so much for your time and your commitment this morning. And we will see you all in a few weeks with the episode 2 of From Microgeneration to Powering the Nation. Thank you and goodbye.